Hi, you guys. Welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I'm the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and welcome to something very different. So today I'm starting a two-part video where we will be talking about picking the right shape sweater for our bodies. So, when I say flattering, understand this throughout the continuation of both videos here. When I say flattering, I'm not talking about how to make yourself look skinny. I'm talking about the aesthetic proportions of the 1/3, 2/3 look, as well as trying to obtain certain aesthetics like creating a wider shoulder or a longer neck, or yes, even cinching in your waist while exaggerating maybe an upper lower proportion. This would be a prime example of trying to delineate a waist and create a waistline while maintaining the 1/3, 2/3 visual aesthetic. But it's not necessarily about looking skinnier. It's about creating good proportions and a good shape for your body, or trying to accentuate or diminish different things we would want to highlight or help hide. So this first part is primarily going to be talking about necklines and silhouette. I had to look for the word I'd used. So primarily we'll be talking about neckline and silhouette in this video. In our next video, we will be talking about sleeve set and sleeve shape. So I decided to do this one first just because it was a little bit easier to kind of walk through. And I know I'm going to want to use visual diagramming. So, you know, we have a teacher's aid today to help with this. So this is, I know this video is going to be clunky and underproduced and everything else. Bear with me. This is a whole different thing for me. I don't do animation or anything else. As I keep saying, I'm a very analog person. So the whiteboard shall be our friend today. But again, flattering is about creating proportion or trying to get the shape that you desire, or the faking the look of the shape that it is that you desire. This isn't about trying to look skinny or lean per se. Most women don't want that stick straight look. Most of us are craving something that looks a little bit rounder and softer, and different cuts can create that shape. So first we're going to talk about the necklines. This is the easiest thing, and this will be the easiest thing for me to show you specifically. So we're going to start here with what we're going to call a sleeveless top. Make sure I'm keeping everything in frame for you guys. All right, so this is our sleeveless top. Right now, we don't have any shape. There's no real silhouette that we've chosen. We're just looking at necklines. So different necklines can create different looks to the body, starting off with your just classic V-neck. So when we use the V-neck, we create an elongated center section here. We elevate and draw the eye from the chest up to the neck, creating length. And it also can make your jawline kind of pull in just a little bit because we've broadened here and your face sits in the middle. So it brings your face down into your chest. It brings your shoulders and chest out and creates length and elongated shape. All I know is how it works. I can speak to experience. A well-cut V-neck does definitely open up the décolletage and make everything look longer. I have a fairly short neck. I'm actually quite squat in my shape. But a couple of you guys have been surprised when you meet me in public. I always tell you I'm only 5'5", I'm only 5'5". I think my full length videos tend to show how squat my proportions are, though. I look like somebody took me and went. So my neck is a little bit thicker and shorter than normal. My torso is a little bit thicker and shorter than normal. I can speak to the elevation and elongating effect of a nice V-neck cut. This also creates balance with a larger shoulder. So when you're talking about an overall sweater, because that V-neck kind of pulls in, if you're particularly broad through the shoulders, that V-neck kind of softens that breadth just a little bit and creates balance because you're exposing here, which kind of brings that eye in just a little bit. It also can help to balance a larger bust line. So if you're built like me, where you're very broad through the shoulder harness area and also happen to be very buxom, a V-neck can create that elongated neckline, an elegant elongated shape here can create a slightly more shape to that jawline, but it also can kind of blend all of this in. So it's not just boobs and shoulders walked into a room. You've got a little bit more balance to your upper half with a V-neck. Now a scoop kind of softens your entire upper body. So we've got just like a regular, oh, wow. You can tell I was on my way to being a Leonardo da Vinci with these art skills, but a scoop neck softens the upper body. Once again, can create that elongated proportion. The more we want to elongate through the neck and soften through the shoulders, the deeper the scoop. Again, this neckline is kind of a prime example of creating elevation and length where there is no length. And it also does make me look a little bit more balanced through here. Now, when you pull me in and you start seeing like the hip proportion and everything else, that changes. But when we're looking from the waist up, I have a little bit more balance through the shoulder area. And we've still created that, again, lengthening through the neckline. Now, I will say, to me personally, I think a adjusted scoop neck, depending on how much you're trying to kind of balance and elongate, deeper gives you more length. Obviously, up until we get into the next zone of the body, which is the bust line. But I think it's easier to play with the depth of a scoop neck sometimes, and it is kind of universally flattering because it doesn't soften the shoulders and bring them in as much as necessarily a V-neck does. This rounded soft neck, I think, is generally universally flattering. Now for a boat neck, we're creating a very blunt line that cuts across the neck here. And this line that we're drawing across the neck, that is going to create width shoulder to shoulder. So if you have very soft shoulders, a boat neck can be very flattering because it can kind of bring those shoulders out. If you're very busty with very soft, narrow shoulders, this can kind of create a better proportion between the bust and the shoulder. Now, if you have, you feel like your neck is too long, maybe, this is going to create a little bit more compression in that visual line because we're going to be drawing everything across this line of the shoulder. So it's going to kind of create a shortening of vision from your height to the bust line. Now, again, as we're talking about the neckline area, this is all just this section, what we're creating with this section. Each zone, as you move through the body, creates different additions. That's why I said this is much easier to start with the neckline, and then we can move out and down as we continue along. So you can continue different silhouettes. So somebody like me with a broader shoulder, a boat is probably not always the most flattering. It's not going to give me the shape that I am trying to achieve, because generally I'm trying to create length in my shape. But if, say, I added a higher waistline to this and created a fuller skirt, say I was doing a dress instead of a sweater, this is going to be balanced by this added width. So we're creating more width down here, and we'd be creating more width across the shoulder line, which is going to create a distinct taper at my natural waist or just below my natural waist. If we create that just below my natural waist, that again adds height to my shape, my particular shape. But that's how you can still continue to balance shapes very easily when we're talking about creating these necklines and shapes. So that is the boat neck. And of course, now I've made a mess out of everything. Please leave a comment down below if you've got other tips, tricks, things that you have found work. This is kind of a accumulation of different dressing guides, my personal experience. I could only speak to dressing my body, my shape, as I've been doing it now for, almost 45 years. But, each of us are going to have different things. So, talk about what your goals are and when you're trying to pick things. But when we're talking about trying to pick good sweater patterns to choose for us, it's like we made it, it fits, but it doesn't look right. These are the things we need to be looking at, because we don't have the opportunity to try these garments on before we buy them. So we're making them for ourselves as we go. And we don't always necessarily get the look, the finished look that we're necessarily looking for. So our final neckline is actually our turtleneck neckline. And I just made that totally a little bottleneck there, but that is kind of what this is going to do overall. This is going to create a very short appearance in the neck. So again, if you've got that very long neck, and you're trying to create maybe a softer shape, this is going to be an amazing option. I know a lot of us feel like we're being suffocated and we look like we've got goiters when we wear turtlenecks. And it's probably because you're like me, you have a very short neck, and this is creating an even more of a shortening effect there. But the advantage to something like a turtleneck is, again, we've now removed all of this visual space here. So our entire garment is pointing up and into the face. So if you're trying to highlight your face, if that's the feature you're really trying to highlight, something like this is going to be exceptionally flattering and give you the look that you're looking for. But it's also going to obscure everything until the next break, the next visual break. So if you're wearing a turtleneck dress, this is going to be primarily what is noticed, maybe an accessory if you're bringing in like a long necklace or a statement piece or something like that. Or if you bring in a belt, that would be the next obvious break. But if you're just wearing a straight dress, your entire focus is now going to be pulling directly to the face, and it's going to create a shortening of your upper body dimension. So overall, I find this to be particularly fascinating, and it's even more fascinating to me in practice just because of how these shapes do completely change how we look in our finished garments. Most of us are talking about looking at sweaters, so we're creating thickness and bulk and everything else across our bodies. So when we're doing that, we need to be aware of what these different shapes are going to be giving us, because you can see as we line them up right next to each other, these are giving us completely different looks. And you can see where we've created length. Your eye is automatically coming to this empty space up here. Your eye automatically is drawn to this straight line, and you're automatically trying to see what this bottleneck there is pointing towards. And it's one of those, you've maybe tried on the garments before in a store and been kind of like, why am I not in love? Why is this not doing what I'm trying to get it to do? Why is this piece not quite right? And you've maybe made yourself a piece before and been like, I love it. It looks good, but I'm going to pass this on to somebody else because something is not quite right. And this is one of the first areas where when we're picking garments to make for ourselves, we have the option to choose what we're going to make, what pattern we're going to choose, and we're going to know a little bit more about how it's going to look on us. So I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to go see if I can find my actual whiteboard eraser, and then we'll come back and talk about silhouette. Okay, so silhouette. This is going to be probably a little bit more touchier for all of us, to be honest. And no, I was not able to find it, but I did find a bigger microfiber cloth to help me here. But I mentioned at the opening, and when I say flattering, I'm not talking about necessarily looking skinnier. We're not trying to, fake being from a 16 to an 8. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create an aesthetic proportion. So most generally, people believe that the 1/3, 2/3 rule is going to give you the more flattering, oh, she's put together. Oh, that outfit looks so good on her. It's not that you look skinny, but flattering means that you're accentuating your better features. You are getting that mathematical equation of aesthetics pulled in correctly. So when you do the 2/3 method, obviously, if you're drawing up, you can highlight your legs. So if you do 1/3, 2/3, or say you want to wear a tunic where you're going to draw down and you do 2/3 with 1/3 in your bottom half, then you can accentuate your upper half. And we again create different break points. So we have a break point that runs from our chin to the top of our bust. We have a break point from our bust to our waist, where either our fake waist or our natural waist. You can pull either proportion there to create your break. You also have a break here at the hip. When you get to your waist to your hip, that is one zone, your hip to your knee, and your knee to your foot. This is not me, this is mathematics. This is Da Vinci and the body proportions. There are also artists who have done diagrams talking about different proportions to create different aesthetics in portraiture and artwork as well. A number of photographers I've seen talking about how to capture, in particularly formal events like weddings, how to create a visual proportion with your bride. So this is not stuff that like I'm coming up with. This is kind of just out there in a number of different places, but it's nice to know information. It's good to have on deck, just dressing ourselves, trying to figure out, how we want to present in the world. So silhouette, this is a little bit touchier because again, we're moving into more of like the body stuff. This isn't meant to make anybody feel any one way or another about their bodies. This is about understanding how to pick patterns that suit us and suit the look we're going for and the shape we want to create. This is all shapes. This is geometry and shapes and coloring pages. All right. So our first silhouette, super, super popular right now. I'm sporting a slightly longer version of one myself. This would be the crop. So when we take our shape here, we're just going to work off of our same rectangle that we have been working off of. So in this case, this is going to be more of our body. So a crop is a great way to create a 1/3, 2/3 proportion. So say we have our sweater here, and we are, you can see, creating that 1/3 here, and say your natural waist is somewhere around here. So if you're wearing something high-waisted, we've now created a perfect 2/3, 1/3 cut. Something that's a little bit more open if you're trying to create bulk through the top, narrowing through the bottom, will give you that effect at this point. But this is going to create a natural 1/3. Now mine's a little bit longer, and that's because I'm wearing a maxi dress. So my goal is to cut a little bit longer. I also have the artificial cut here that gives me the upper proportion of the 1/3. Accidental choice of outfit. I was just trying to find, I put the belt on because this is a very blousy dress and I was feeling a little shapeless even with the cardigan on. So I was trying to create a cinch point and a visual cut. So it was intentional but unintentional for the video. I actually didn't know I was finally going to film this until about 5 minutes before I turned on the camera. So this is a great length for layering because it does give you a visual cutoff, and especially if you're wearing, you know, something that goes from your waist to the floor, this is going to give you that automatic cut. Now, ideally for this cardigan, I would have it about an inch higher than where it is sitting. It sits a little bit too close to my hip line. This is my actual like hip flare here, down here. So if I pulled this up just a little bit more, it would give me more of the look I would want in general, but this is, to me, the perfect layering length. So if you are looking to make, you know, the sweater that you put over like your spaghetti strap tops, if you're a girly like me and need more in our undergarments, you know, we might have that cute skirt dress we enjoy wearing, but we want something to go over it. So cardi or just a straight shirt over a dress is a super cute way to create bulk through the top, narrowing through the bottom. Or if it's a little bit more fitted, you can, you know, create your 1/3 proportion. And if you're short like I am, this is a great way to create that line without adding too many layers or too many accessory pieces. It's a fast and easy way to do that. But a crop can look great on anybody. If you look at a lot of 50s and 60s fashion, you will see a lot of cropped tops over dresses or pencil skirts, and they almost always have kind of more of this away from the body, draped from the bust, away from the body effect through the center. Absolutely gorgeous. And then again, from here, you know, you can obviously pick your neckline option to create more of the shape that you're trying to create as you move up the body. So our, of course, I'm going to make this more difficult for myself. The next shape we are going to talk about is an all over oversize. This is going to be something where it's way harder to find your perfect amount of positive ease. So if you're not aware, positive ease is this space away from the body. And even you tend to have some ease in your sleeves as well. So negative ease is like what we have in socks, where we want the leg of the sock and the foot of the sock as we wear them to stay tight to the skin. That is negative ease that we're building in. It's not exactly the size of our foot. It's a little bit smaller than the size of our foot. In the case of positive ease, it's the space from the body to the outside of the garment. So my dress almost has no ease, whereas my cardigan has lots of positive ease throughout the shaping of it. So when we're doing an oversized piece, we can be oversized at almost any point and in any direction. So that's why this gets a little bit more difficult. I put this in here at this point to counter talking about crop, but oversize can play into any of our other shapes, from A-line to tunic. You can have an oversized wrap shape. What you need to know is generally when you're playing with oversize, you either are trying to balance something or you're trying to over fill a certain area. So let's say you are specifically tall, a very tall body. So your underarm to your foot, you've got a very long line in your body. So for you, in order to kind of counterbalance some of this, you might want to go with maybe like a 6 to 12 inch, we'll say 6 inch each size positive ease. And that's going to give you very full shape through here. And you could maybe blouse it just a little bit, but not really. Like you don't really want to create a full waist here, just a little blousing, so you don't lose any bust fullness in your silhouette, but you're going to continue to come down at like a tunic size. I don't want it to kick out to a full A-line here. And, you know, say you're wearing pants and you got some little pointy shoes that you got sticking out down here. Well, you totally have elf toes. I'm sorry for you. But you are trying to maybe create some extra balance where maybe you're not as full here, but you want to create the illusion of fullness here. And you're going to come down longer because your legs are so much longer than the rest. Or say, let's make these, they're saying gauchos are popular right now. So let's make these more like gauchos. And you've got little stubby feet now. So again, you can see how that, even just the addition of that changed how the blousing for our oversized shirt. We didn't create any distance in the rise here. We just changed how far down the leg the pant was coming, but we've completely changed what that oversized look is. So this is something you're going to use when you're trying to create a balance. If you want, one of my particular favorite like knockaround styles is something that's going to give me a little bit more drop in the armhole. So we're going to widen this area a little bit and probably not quite as much positive ease through the bust and body. Not something that's going to hit tight to my body, but something that's going to kind of give me a little bit more comfort, but not losing any of my body shape here. And with that would also come a slightly lower sleeve line here. And that's going to give me kind of, it's going to minimize this area. We're going to lose this definition through the center of my body. And we're going to kind of cut it, as I've frequently have said with a lot of the sweaters and tops that I've made or talked about here on the channel. I want to cut generally at least halfway down my rear end, not to a full tunic length, but at least cover half the tuchus back there. And this oversized proportion, when I wear that in that kind of a length, it kind of pulls me down a little bit, but I don't look unfeminine. Because again, I'm playing with like the necklines and stuff like that. I tend to, with something like that, I want something with more of like a layered drop neckline. But generally what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pull focus from my entire torso and pull it either to the top of my head or down to, say, like a nice shoe or something. That's something I like doing for the weekend just because it gives me that kind of overall comfy vibes. But finding the right shape, fit, neckline, and design that is going to work in your oversize is very difficult, because everything else that we're going to talk about, from our sleeve set, our neckline, and the rest of the silhouettes, oversized is kind of the most ambiguous of them all, because it takes into account everything. I probably should have saved it for the end, but I thought it was a good counterbalance to the crop. All right. So the next one, this is super simple. We're going to talk about a quick tunic. So again, here is our body. Let's say our belly button is about here. Our pant rise is going to be here. So a tunic is going to come here. And what that's going to do is that's going to make this the 2/3 and this the 1/3 proportion. This is going to elongate the upper body. This is going to make this the primary focus. So if you're wanting to put something with a bunch of cabling and lace work and things like that, a tunic is a great opportunity to show off your stitch work as well. But that is going to raise that 2/3 to this portion of the body. So when we're doing that, we also need to make sure we've got the neckline we want. We don't, necessarily want to cut ourselves off at the collarbone unless we really do want that focus to stay into the center mass of the body. So if you have a more apple shape, and this is maybe the area, you don't necessarily want to obscure it, but you don't want to make this 100% of your focus, this might be an opportunity for you to maybe pull away from a full tunic, or combine, say, a tunic with an A-line, where we're going to create a float away from the body that is falling from our waist and our bust and kind of falling away. But the big thing with the tunic is you are reversing that proportion. You're bringing the eye into this part of the body instead of kind of pulling into a line away or down. A-line. I've kind of almost accidentally drawn one here. A-line, again, can come in any shape, any length, but what it does is it does exactly what it says it's going to do. So right here around your bust line, it's going to kind of kick just a little bit, starting around the belly area. So traditionally, now again, some things aren't always as they seem. We're going to create what appears to be a little bit of a kick starting somewhere between here and here on the body. So somewhere between under bust and I would say the top of the hip flare is where we're going to start to create that kick. Now, I think overall, this is one of the more flattering shapes on knitwear. And it's because it creates float. You don't have to have a ton of structure, and it creates float, and it's a nice feminine look. Now, that's just the look I'm going for generally, which is probably why I feel that way. But I think things with an A-line tend to universally be a very flattering shape on almost every body shape. And of course, when I say that, I'm talking, you know, about our traditional, no, not quite that curvy for hourglass. And then we have kind of more of the apple. And then we've also got a more widely recognized shape with a more pear-shaped body. And of course, obviously, these are stick versions of that. I actually think this looks more like a little pomegranate. Anyway, I think across all of these shapes, this tends to look the best. It grazes the outside of the hip. It falls away from the bust and kind of has a nice natural drape. I think an A-line can look good in just about any length. I don't think trapeze and A-line necessarily are fantastic in a crop, but especially if you're doing something like an overpiece, a cardigan or something where you do want to kind of pull away, like I said, with the 1960s silhouette where the jackets were definitely had positive ease under the bust line. If you're trying to create more of like that shape, actually an A-line is perfect for that. And it's not going to give you too much volume at the time that you're going to end the garment there. Grazes the lines in the belly and the hip area, helps to create an unbroken line. So you are creating length in this area. And creates a more volume at the hip because you are kicking out here. This can create more volume at the hip if you are a more straight figure shape or a very top heavy figure shape. If you want to create just a little bit more fullness through the hip line, especially in if we take an A-line, obviously a little bit longer to where we're cutting across the hips or at least on top of the hips here, that's going to give a little bit more fullness here, which will balance obviously the upper body proportions as well. I'm actually going to do these out of order. Next up, we are going to talk about Empire, and with that comes, any type of stylistic cut, like say a peplum. So we are going to come back in with our little fake body here. So for an Empire, we are tucking here, skirting here. So for here, this could be as dramatic as you want it to be. Peplums obviously create a ton of fullness wherever they cut. Empire is just an under the bust shape. So I'm trying to pull more of an Empire with where I've got my belt. But like I showed earlier, I can slide that more down towards my natural waistline, although that shows the seam in my dress there. I am trying to create a more Empire look here. So again, you are going to create tapering. For me, this is right above the smallest part visually from the front of my waist. So hip, bottom of the bust. I'm trying to create a tension here and draw in here and at least hitting that area where I'm at my smallest straight on. Now, the advantage to this, you don't have to be dramatic. It does not have a ton of fullness here. So you can create this baby cinching right here and just have an ever so slight drop off from there. And for me, one of the reasons why I love an Empire or peplums are not good for me because it adds too much volume. But what that cut does is that is generally where my 1/3, 2/3 is going to hit. Most of my dresses and clothing and things are in that like knee area. Wearing maxis is something that just happened this year. I don't normally wear a ton of maxi length things. So when I'm trying to create this shape, generally I'm trying to create my clothing proportion from my knee to my shoulder. So for me, this is generally going to be that 1/3 area. But I think it looks really good on a lot of different shapes. When you do have a very rectangular shape, you know, you can create a little bit more hippage by having that fall out and maybe a little bit more fullness here. There are sweaters that are designed in multiple pieces where the banding and the underbust area is actually a tighter knit piece or a tighter crocheted piece of fabric. And you actually have an effect of a gather for the bottom half of the sweater. You see that in a lot of the like Jane Austen inspired type pieces as well, where there's kind of like a pseudo extra stitching in here, but you have this tight fabric through the underbust area and kind of a more standard knitwear material through the bust line. My note here, it accentuates the bust. That happens to be one of my better areas to look at. I don't want to be a walking set of Tetons, but you know, it is what it is. It does accentuate your bust line. It does draw the eye up. Again, depending on what neckline you choose, you know, you can create an elongated effect here that is going to create length and distance from your garment waistline to your chin, and you can create elevation through here, accentuating this area without adding anything, without creating bulk. And also, to me, the Empire waist does not create visual bulk at your shoulder points. I don't need any extra bulk there. I don't need any extra bulk here. It's just a nice place to land. When you draw further down into something like a peplum, most of the time that's going to drop a little bit further down, but it's trying to create the same kind of silhouette. So let's bring our rectangle body down. We're going to create a hard line at about our crop zone. So this is where our pseudo waist transition is going to be, and then a peplum is going to pop way out there. That's going to add fullness visually in both places, above and below where that peplum hits, and it's going to create a softer hip outer thigh line, but it's going to create the illusion of a wider line there as you come out from the skirting of the peplum. So it's a really great way to create fullness through here. You can also drop the visual waistline a little bit if you're very tall. You can kind of drop that waistline just a little bit more and then create that fullness underneath. On the right body, I am not this body. I am not the body that does a peplum. I love a nice peplum though. I think it's a great cut. Even if you're not going for the full effect here, if you have a straighter silhouette and you have something that's just a little bit maybe softer that creates that skirting effect, especially with something like a pair of skinny jeans, I think this is a really nice aesthetic. Now, we're kind of going to stop talking about outside proportions after this, but this theory continues on through your pant leg and everything else. So just me personally, I would not then try to pair something like this with anything that is going to be wide. So say like a bootcut jean. I had to think what direction I was moving in there. So we don't want to do this to our body because it's going to truncate. We're going to shorten the space between the two wide points again. And I think it makes your legs look very trunky. But if you take something like this, if you are a very straight shape and you come down in a very straight leg or straight skirt, a pencil skirt is fantastic. We saw tons of that in the early 2000s. I think this is very flattering on the right shape, and it is, I'm envious if you're the shape that this works on, because it's definitely not me. I love a good tunic. I also think peplums work great in a tunic length. I think Empire also works beautifully in a tunic length. My preferred, again, is at least mid-belly to mid-tuchus, but I'm not opposed to a tunic. I do love a nice long top. I'm very glad I decided to split this into two because we're already going way on. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, it's a little less silhouette, a little more interior design, but wraps. Now, we have already talked about what the V-neck can do in elongating the neckline, maintaining shoulder proportion, drawing the eye up this way. For a wrap, to me, a wrap can be extremely similar to what you get with a true Empire, where you're cutting in this underbust region. But what you're doing is you're creating a continuation of a line. And obviously, depending on how far you're wrapping, height and everything else, you might have to move across your body shape slightly differently here. This, to me, again, we're getting that elongation of the neck. I think it can also give elongation to the torso, depending on where that wrap is going to hit and where it's going to sit on your body. It also gives you an automatic point for where you're creating your waist break. So again, your waist in your garment is not necessarily the waist of your body. For me, I'm creating a higher waistline. Most of the wrap things that I do also create a higher waistline. So I'm generally looking for something that ties where this belt is sitting, and it from there tends to fall in a A-line shape from the wrap. That tends to be what I prefer personally. But this is creating, again, that shape up to create visual lines up to the chest, neck, face area. It's nothing to put, something else underneath here. If you want to help create a different shape there, I guess you can't quite see that in the dotted line. So, before, you can create where you want that cut to be, or you can come in and do something like a boat neck underneath it, to alter this visual space. Automatic V, giving length to neck, visual break for the waist. Yeah. So that's what I have for silhouette. Now the next section to me is the hardest to picture and going to be the hardest for me to draw, and that is going to be sleeves. So we are going to do that is an entire separate video. Sleeves also do the exact same thing. I know this is a ton a ton of information. It really is. There's the geometry of the body is absolutely fascinating in general. I think you can fake so many different things and how you look with how you dress. But again, the primary reason for doing this and talking about these proportions and shapes on the body is to give us an idea when we're looking at a pattern, how is this going to look on me? If I choose to make this garment, since I can't try this on at the store, if I choose to make this, what is this going to look like once I put it on my body? What are we actually looking at here? So if you have any questions, leave them down below. If you have any thoughts or opinions, leave them down below. As always, I do ask for kindness and respect for myself and the other commenters. This is kind of, I'm going to be honest, as much as I feel like I'm talking about these things, I am barely grazing the surface of understanding how to choose sweater shapes for your body. Quite literally, this is the highlights reel of what is out there. So this is just to give you a general idea. So I love you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful, fantastic day. As always, I look forward to seeing you real soon. Please take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.